Okay, so today I'm going to be talking to someone who I've known for most of my life since I was very young. He's a family friend, Richard Roberts. He is a professional geologist and a part-time landscape photographer, which he does in his spare time. And we're going to be discussing how how we both view and consider landscape as far as composition and I suppose lots of different elements of landscapes, and that's what we're going to get into. So, hello, Rich.
Hello, Simon. How are you?
Not bad. How are you doing?
All right, thanks, man. Good to be here.
Yeah, we talked about this last year briefly, and it's great to have you on as a guest because it's a little bit unusual. We never had a recorded conversation, or I don't think we've had an online conversation before, but it's nice to be able to discuss something like this with you. Now, you've given me loads of brilliant images to discuss and like lots of your different types of photography, and it's in categories, as you mentioned to me.
Yeah.
What are these different categories? Like, is this different trips that you've taken or different time that you spent in places?
Yeah. So, well, firstly, the Llandudno set is because I live here. So this is kind of like my town. Well, I live most of the time in Dubai these days, but I still have a place here in Llandudno in Wales. And then the other sets are, trips I've been on, basically landscape photography, workshops. Some of them are workshops, some of them are just photography trips. So some of them you go and you do, you might have some like tuition while you're there on the course. So you might take photographs during the morning and do some editing in the afternoon. Those are quite useful because then you can feed back what you've learned in the editing session into the photo shoot the next day, and others are just we go into an area and just try and photograph it as best we can. You've got a set amount of time, a bunch of different people, and an itinerary, and every day you go somewhere and take photographs.
That's brilliant.
And I think it's a really interesting way to do it, actually, because it's quite hard. Like, I live in Llandudno, I'm here for a few weeks at the moment. It's a very nice area to live in. There's plenty of things to photograph here, but just kind of everyday life kind of gets in the way a bit, So the great thing about a photography trip or workshop, whatever, you just take a week or 5 days, whatever you can, and just dedicate that specifically just to taking photographs is a really good way to kind of, indulge yourself in the process, not worry about, I've got the dentist at 3:00 or I've got this thing or that thing. You just focus solely on taking pictures, and usually on those trips, everything else is provided. Driver is there, food and places to stay and all that. So literally just turn up with your camera and just do photography for a week or whatever it is. So I found those to be really, I would say like a crucial aspect of sort of improving, and a critical part of like the journey through photography.
Do they discuss theory, or is it kind of like how does it kind of introduce you into the group initially? How does that work?
So they discuss. So basically, I've done most of the courses, most of the trips with one landscape photographer from Scotland, professional landscape photographer called Bruce Percy. So I did a trip with him. My first one was in Iceland, and he discusses theory in the sense that he'll come along and help you with the composition. Sometimes you'll be walking along and you'll see like something will catch your eye, and you'll get the camera out and you'll be, oh, that's brilliant, and you'll be trying to take a picture of it, but somehow it's just not quite working. It's a bit messy, or and when you're, especially in the beginning, you don't quite really understand what makes a good composition and what doesn't, so much. So in that case, he can come along and help you. He won't do it for you, but he'll tell you, like a suggestion, maybe it's better if there's less objects in that frame, or maybe it's better if, that mountain in the background isn't quite as small, or, you try and balance the foreground and the background a bit so that one isn't overwhelming the other, and then that kind of thing. So there's on the, like, a sort of general landscape photography tour. I think that's what he calls it. There's a tour. It's just where you go around taking photographs all week, And a workshop is where you kind of in a classroom for part of it doing theory, and trying to learn something. So there was another trip I went on in Scotland. That was called a digital darkroom trip. Well, that was really useful actually, because we went to this place in northwest of Scotland, beautiful area. So we'd spend all morning taking photographs out on the beach or in a forest one day, and that was really cool. And then in the afternoon, you come back, and we'd each have a computer, like an iMac or whatever, and we'd do some editing, and we work on our photographs together, and just get feedback from the trip leader, from Bruce, and also from the other people who are on the trip as well. And a really interesting thing about those kind of trips, you'd have like 6 people, for example, were in the same place, basically taking the same photograph, really, or photographing the same landscape. And yet we'd all come back with totally different images and different ideas, about how to frame it and what kind of composition works and all that kind of thing. So it's quite interesting when you realize how differently people see what's essentially the same landscape in front of them,
Yeah. Do you have like an itinerary where he says, you'll need this lens, a tripod, this and that, because he sort of give you an equipment requirement? Yeah, because I can imagine, when I talk in theory, just to clarify for anyone watching, I just mean the ideas before the practice. It's like you have an idea of what to do, and then that's the theory. In practice, as you said, it may not work out, and that's where you can learn more than just theory can take you, I suppose.
So you have a kit list of stuff, and part of that is just equipment just to survive in the outside, because sometimes we're in horrendous weather, and he doesn't shy away from that, which is great, because sometimes you get really nice colors and conditions, and sometimes the landscape looks more interesting immediately before or after a horrendous weather event of some kind, So quite often you find yourself outside, like, 40-mile-an-hour wind or driving rain. So you've got you need waterproofs and, just general outdoor kit to survive. And then photography equipment, he's not going to tell you what camera to buy, or he'll tell you a range of lenses that would be nice to have if you've got them, but he's not going to tell you to go out and buy something you don't already have just to come on this trip, really.
Okay.
One of the things he will recommend, like I would say strongly recommend, is filters. So polarizing filter, graduated filters. And it seems to be that over the years, they've become a bit less popular with some people as the software becomes more capable. People are thinking, well, I can fix that afterwards in Lightroom or something, so no need for that in the field. And because they are a bit inconvenient, sometimes filters, you have to put this little holder on the front of the lens and slot the filter in. And if it starts raining, that's the first thing to get wet. And they're a bit tricky, to use. But I still think it's better to get the picture to get the take the photograph as best you can in the first place, and have less work to do in Photoshop later on, or Lightroom, whatever. Don't rely on the software to try and patch up things that you could have just avoided in the field in the first place. And that was going a bit off topic here again, but back to what I said before about the digital darkroom class. It's one of the main things we learned there, because you take a picture in the morning and you think, oh, that's pretty good, and then you hadn't realized that in the bottom, in the foreground or something, there's some kind of messy seaweed or something. You spent 20 minutes in Photoshop trying to, mask it out or something, right? In the field, if you just picked your camera and tripod up and just gone like that, the problem would have been solved, So the next day, you remember that, and when you're in the field, you're like, okay, let's make sure we don't get this in the shot, or we're trying to avoid this, or this bit's a bit too bright, so we use a filter in, put a graduated filter in just to kind of tone down the sky a bit, or so it's kind of like feeding back those lessons learned
So
from the editing
software. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
You mentioned Photoshop and Lightbox. What software do you use? Is that the two, or is there more?
So the popular one these days is Lightroom. A lot of people use that. I don't. I've never really liked it. The good thing with Lightroom, like in the beginning, Lightroom was kind of almost like a database for storing all your photographs. And it also had some of the editing capabilities that Photoshop had. But Photoshop was still like way better, like much better in terms of just like the nuance and level of control you had. Was much better for Photoshop. So I just basically store all my photographs on the computer in folders, and I just open them in Photoshop when I need to, or when I have time to edit them. So for me, I'm just using a Mac with Photoshop, and there's a Photos app on the computer on the Mac, and it's the same one that your iPhone has essentially. The good thing with Mac OS X is, and even the iPhone these days, it will support RAW files natively, so you don't need any fancy software, you know. So I can upload everything onto the computer. I can look at it in Photos, and then to do any editing, I use Photoshop. I'm not bothering using Lightroom. I probably should do. There's good things in Lightroom. You can use it to help catalog all your photographs. Right. So you can apply keywords to a bunch of photographs and say, right, these are all, pictures taken in Llandudno. These are all clouds. This is fog, blah, blah, blah. And which helps you to find them more quickly after. So if somebody says to you, have you got a picture of a foggy day in the Lake District? And you can just put a couple of keywords in, and there it pops up.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, I just have to go scrolling through all my old folders, when did I go there? Oh yeah, here it is, but it kind of works for me.
Yeah, it's my system, method in the madness stuff works. I know where it is, but it doesn't make sense. What do you look for when you're making a composition? Is there something where you specifically are locked in, or is it what works? What is it you look for? Is there a rule of thirds? Is there kind of
I think even before that, sometimes you go to an area and you think, well, this looks quite interesting. So you start walking around a bit, and then you'll notice yourself sometimes just like looking at something. You'll just go, something's caught your eye, and you're not really sure why or what it is exactly that's about that. So I try and notice when I'm doing that. Try and recognize, like, you look like that and okay, something over there has caught my eye. Let's go and have a closer look. And then just check the place out for a minute or two, and then get the camera out, and then start looking through the viewfinder, and then get the tripod out. Because the worst thing you can do is go somewhere. Let's say tomorrow we decided, hey, let's go to the beach in Llandudno, take some photographs. You get out of the car, you put your tripod down, you put your camera on it, and then you just expect the photograph to
happen,
arrive in front of you. It's not going to happen, right? You need to walk around and try to look for something interesting, and that depends on all kinds of things. That's one of the reasons I like the beaches, is because you never see the same thing twice. You got a combination of the tides coming in and out. The sand is different, the ripples are different, sunrise is different, sunset is different, rainy day is different. So it's quite a dynamic environment. So it's always something, we see something different. Even if you go to the same beaches quite regularly, So I don't have like a fixed idea. Generally, I don't go out and think, today I will photograph this, Sometimes you might know based on the weather forecast, okay, there's a big storm coming tomorrow, and then after it's gone, the sunset will be sending some light this way, so it might light up the back of the storm as it moves away across the sea, or so something like that. You can do some planning, so you can plan where to be and when to be, and you can kind of have a rough idea. I might take a picture. I want a picture of the beach with the sunset behind it, but that's about it, really. I'm not going out to specifically take a picture of a piece of wood or something, on the beach.
You're not trying to make statements necessarily with your...
Not really. Just trying to record the landscape as it is, just in the natural landscape as it is in front of you. And it's quite easy to take it for granted when you live somewhere that's quite nice. It's quite beautiful. You just live here all the time. You're just like, it's just Llandudno Beach, isn't it? Or, wherever you live. And just going back to some of the trips I took, the first trip I went on, I was lucky enough to go to Iceland in 2014. And Iceland is just amazing. Like it's hard to take a bad photograph. Everywhere you look, there's a volcano and a glacier and an iceberg and all this. It's like, oh, it's amazing. And then when you come back to Wales, I remember just going down, took my camera out one day just to the beach, and I was like, there's no volcanoes here, and can't find any icebergs, and it's not quite as spectacular.
Yeah.
And I did another trip in Scotland with Bruce again, and we went to a place called Isle of Arran, and it's like a small island, but it's really interesting. It's quite varied. It's got lots of different types of landscapes on it, and it's quite similar to Wales actually. And he was teaching us to kind of zoom in on your landscape and try to recognize what it is about just that small area that makes it interesting or beautiful or worthwhile to get the camera out. And lots of the pictures I took there, I thought they were reasonable pictures. And then I realized that they're very similar to stuff that we have in Wales back home. So it's like, okay, I can take pictures of a mountain and a river in Scotland. I can do the same thing in Wales, really. Yeah. So, and that kind of unlocked the whole new like area of photography to me, because I think I got spoiled in the beginning. You go on a trip to Iceland or whatever, you've got waterfalls and volcanoes. Brilliant. Yeah. And then you come back here and you can be a little bit underwhelmed. Sometimes you need like a key just to kind of unlock everything again, and just to kind of open your eyes again and see things differently, or see things with like fresh eyes again, and realize that there is actually quite a lot of beautiful stuff around, and you just have to, you need to kind of like reset yourself, reset your eyes almost, because you could take stuff for granted. You see it every day. It's very easy to just get blasé about that, so that was a lesson well learned.
That's one thing I've noticed, which is a preference of mine with painting and with photography, and it's something which you've got in the pictures that you've sent me, at least, is there's no people. And is that a conscious choice that you're like, have the landscape?
I go out of my way to avoid people. I don't want them in my photographs. In the beginning of my photographic journey, let's call it, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to use a camera properly. I bought a DSLR. I didn't know how to do it. So I joined this company, local company. They run events. They're called Wellshot, and they do events and activities. And it's really good as a beginner, because they give you a chance to do different genres of photography. So we tried some street photography and tried a little bit of portrait photography and sports photography. Went to a racetrack in Anglesey, photographed motorbikes zooming around. That was quite good.
Brilliant.
But in the beginning, I thought I liked landscapes. And then after about a year or two of trying various different things, I realized actually I just like landscapes. So after that, I had a couple of years where I was trying to do all different, just experimenting with different types of photography, really. But in the end, I just came back to doing landscapes, because I think that's kind of what I loved in the beginning anyway. But I just thought I just needed to try different stuff as well, just to make sure that I was kind of focusing on one thing, because I realized you can't be good at all different types of photography. I think you're better off just finding something you like and just kind of focusing on that. So I went down a landscape route, and generally, I go out of my way to avoid people, because I don't really, I think I've got one picture, a landscape picture that I like with a person in it, or maybe two out of 20,000 or something. So that's kind of deliberate strategy. And even when I go on a photography trip with other people, I think most of the other people there are quite like-minded as well, because we'll drive to a location and maybe say we're going to be 6 or 8 of us in a van, and then we get out of the van and then we just scatter like that, because we just don't want to be in each other's photographs. It's quite antisocial in that sense. We're not going, oh, what have you got on the back of your camera? And we're just like, boom, get away from each other. And then at the end, come back and say, "What did you get? What did you get? Oh, that was nice." Yeah. So yeah, that was definitely that's a policy, definite, deliberate policy of mine. Yeah.
Yeah. There are some of
Okay.
these images that you've sent me that are, I don't know if you made them black and white or if they just look black and white, but they stand out as specific. And if you can pronounce the name, because I'm terrible at pronouncing the name of where that is as well.
Yeah, it's from an area of Iceland called Fjallaback. Yeah. It's kind of part of the interior of Iceland. Not easy to get to, almost impossible to get to in the winter. But the great thing about it is that it's just a volcanic landscape, and if you go there in the winter, it's covered in snow. So it's kind of a very simple landscape. So a bit like the fog, it's almost just like simplified the landscape for you, you know. So essentially, what you end up with is just like a white landscape with volcanic mountains and volcanic ridges, which is just black rock basically sticking out of the white snow. And so it's quite a sort of graphic landscape, you know, and quite easy to make simple compositions there. I think there are some people would probably struggle with it and just think there's nothing there to see, you know, just white and you know, occasional black rock sticking up. But actually, I think it makes things quite nice, and because it's all just a completely like natural environment, and the shapes of the hills there and the sides of the volcanoes, they're all just like really nice kind of natural looking curves and shapes, and the kind of and you can work the landscape a bit differently there, because compared to like how I do here, I typically go down to the beach and get like camera right close to something. In that environment, you can kind of stand back a bit and zoom in on an area, and the composition is slightly different, I think. And I've noticed actually that was one of the few times where I've used a square format. It's nearly most of the other time I'm doing everything in 5x4, you know, or 10x8, whatever. And I think that I'm not sure why that is, but I got a suspicion it's something to do with using a telephoto lens. There's something about using that telephoto, it fits nicer into a square for some reason. I'm not sure why that is. I'm still pondering on that one. But that's a really nice area to go to. It's a real simple environment, really, in terms of what it looks like, just black and white. So when I was doing the editing, even though there was a little bit of color there, I thought, well, let's just make it black and white anyway, because it's a kind of black and white, colorless landscape. Brilliant place to go. Really hard to get to. You need 2 guides with specialist vehicles and massive tires, and driving around in the middle of nowhere for a week, totally off the grid, no phone signal, nothing. Staying in a little hut. It was really, really good, like off the grid kind of place. And I've been to another area in Iceland as well, a bit northeast of there, called Askja, which is kind of in the middle again. And it's that's quite a simple environment too, even though it's totally different, really. It's volcanic still. So volcanoes are there, you've got mountains sticking up, and mostly the whole of the landscape is just covered. Looks like a gravel when you go and see it initially, but it's actually like volcanic detritus. It's called tephra, and it's stuff that comes out of a volcano. And when we went there was 2 distinct like colors of this volcanic ash and tephra. And then I realized that it come from 2 different eruptions of the same volcano, and one was lighter than the other, and they were different colors as well. So one of these rocks was more dense than the other one. The black stuff was a bit less dense, and there was like a kind of almost gold colored ash out of this particular eruption. But because the densities were different, the wind would carry these particles and deposit them in different areas, because some are lighter and some are heavier. And so the wind helps to kind of mold the landscape. And and the density of rocks, of these two different colors of rocks, kind of contributed to where the wind had deposited them. And so you ended up with like these ripples of different colors, like alternating black and gold and black and gold. And that was really interesting to kind of understand and realize like the kind of geological side of that, which is kind of my background as well. Helped me to, understand why the landscape was like that, which is, interesting, but also I'm thinking maybe it can help me predict those kind of things as well. Because there's other places I've been to in Scotland as well, where like there's a big green boulder sitting on an orange platform, basically next to the sea. So I'm looking at it, thinking that's really cool. And it's like the boulder is like a glacial erratic, so it came out of a melted glacier long time ago and just got dumped on top of some bright red sandstone, which outcrops near the beach. And so I was wondering, instead of just treating the landscape completely randomly and just kind of wandering around looking for something nice to photograph, is there a way that you could like use your knowledge and your background of geology to try and predict, where you might find an interesting looking landscape based on the rock type that, is present in a location or not? Because some rocks look nicer than others, so.
And that's
sorry.
And you can. Is that the?
That's still a sort of work in progress. It's just something I'm considering and thinking about. Something that's in the back of my mind when I visit places. But I sent you a set of pictures from a place called Egg in Scotland, which this photographer from Scotland, Bruce Percy, he'd been there a bunch of times, run some courses there. I'd never managed to make it any of those courses, but last year I had an opportunity just to go on my own. So I went up there for a week, and it's an amazing landscape. And a big reason for that is because the sandstone that outcrops there on that coast, on the west coast of the Isle of Egg, it's a really cool. It's called the Valtos sandstone, and inside the sandstone there's these massive concretions. So they're like balls of like super hard sandstone. It's much harder than the rest of the sandstone around it. So the softer stuff that's around it gets eroded over time. And these balls, they look like cannonballs, like boulder size. They get left behind. And sometimes they just fall out of the cliff and land down on the beach, on top of another rocky platform. And sometimes they're sticking up out of the rocky platform because everything else has been eroded by the sea. And yet these kind of concretions just sit there. They look a bit like mushrooms, and they're quite circular, usually in profile. And they're quite unique. They're quite hard to find those. It's not common at all. And obviously the advantage there is you got in Scotland, there's always a nice something in the background. There's always something fairly spectacular, on the coast of Scotland. So in that place, you've got the Isle of Run, just a couple of miles away in the distance, which basically is just like a load of mountains in the sea, which just looks great anyway. And then you put this interesting coastline in front of that with these concretions and these different sandstone formations. And you've got a lot to work with, as a landscape photographer. It's like, wow. And there's no people around there, no one there at all. I saw one person in a whole week. I stayed there. And it was this lady, she was going swimming in the sea every afternoon. That was it. The rest of the time, it was just, me and the landscape and my camera, and just kind of exploring this part of the coastline. Probably a stretch of about 3 or 4 kilometers of coastline, cliffs in some places, beaches. I was there for a week just photographing that.
So having a geology background, is texture a big important aspect to you to kind of really get something which almost feels that, like visceral, like you could actually, or tangible, I should say, where people feel like they can actually feel it in your imagery?
That's a good question. I've not really thought about the texture much before, but I think it must play a part, because there are some. Yeah, I think there are some rock types that kind of lend themselves to photography a bit more easily than others. If it's like you get like a dark coloured rocks that you get quite a lot. Quite often, you on the beach or coastline, you get dark coloured rocks that are covered in brown seaweed or kelp or something quite difficult to bring out any detail there. So generally, I'm looking for something a bit brighter for the foreground, so that if when you're doing the editing phase, if it's a little bit too dark, you can just lift the shadows a little bit and still have some detail there. So it shouldn't just look like a muddy lump, or but there are occasions you can use that to your advantage. If you've got like some rocks that don't look very nice, if there are a lot of them, you can use that and kind of arrange them so they all become one unit. So one of the pictures I sent you from Llandudno is a picture of the pier, and the pier is kind of in the background, and the tide is coming in. And those rocks in the foreground there on that picture, they're not particularly nice looking rocks. They're a bit sort of muddy, and they've got some barnacles on them and stuff. But in that picture, I think I just arranged it so there was like a whole bank of them, and there's water in front of them and water behind them. So they just become an object, so texture. I guess it is important. I would say color tone, I suppose, is more important. Anything super bright or super dark, try and stay away from. Really, something in the mid-range that looks a bit more interesting, it could be a winner.
It does seem like this picture specifically that you're talking about with Llandudno Pier, it highlights the layers that you like to capture, which is great, because you've got obviously this diagonal layer of these dirty, earth tone rocks. And then you've got the structure of the pier, which is obviously this amazing man-made structure, which is just cast out into the sea. And then above that, the drifting sky, which is all very light and almost pastel colors. So it kind of does give that layer of distance and depth and into the horizon, which is another probably an important aspect of capturing a scene, is to have, as you said, the foreground, midground, background, and then having subjects which encompass that really in a nice way, as far as what's going to sit well here to complement the other element, as opposed to just anything.
Well, what I've just realized about that picture is the horizon is kind of in the middle.
Oh yeah, I didn't
Isn't it, right? Myself. And it doesn't seem to be too much of a problem in that particular image.
No,
it works somehow. I think just because I wanted to leave enough room for the sky, because just by good fortune, I was taking this sunset, so the sky was a bit pink towards the left of the photograph, but then the clouds were moving over at quite a rate, so I slowed the exposure down there. So it was probably, I don't know, 10 or 20 seconds or something like that for that exposure. So you can see, you get that idea of the movement of the clouds, passing overhead. And also it just kind of flattens out the sea.
Yeah.
So it just kind of simplifies everything again, doesn't it? So the water that's in the foreground is just one unit.
Yeah.
And then those rocks, none of which are particularly nice looking, they just become one other object on the way to you looking at the subject of the photograph, which is really the end of the pier.
There is a sharpness to them, though, which is, again, it's one of those things which adds a lot of value to the images, that you've got on one of the closest rocks, you've got something which is a light face to it with some yellow, orange and blue tones in there. And I know that colour's not a huge thing for you, but it is points of interest that are going to react with the blue tones. And when it comes to the colour wheel, those are going to be complementary and are going to react in a specific way. So I suppose that's something which, whether consciously or not, is going to be ingrained in your practice. But another thing that I've noticed with this image specifically is that the actual shoreline creates an opposite diagonal, which is something which I don't know if you consciously capture, but because you've got two diagonals from the here on the rocks, the sand, the coastline there, going the opposite diagonal is a nice compositional element.
That was one of the things that caught my eye at the time. Was you see where the shoreline meets the sand,
Yeah.
There's a thin area there where the water is very shallow, and it's reflecting the pink of the sky, so it's almost like a little pink line.
Yeah.
That was the thing that caught my eye. Actually, it's probably the reason I stopped to take that photograph.
Really?
In the first place, because the earlier part of that evening was a continuous disappointment of not being able to find anything to photograph.
Yeah.
I was determined I was going to take a particular photograph. Actually, it was my fault. I went out that night to take a particular photograph. I had a very fixed idea of an image that I wanted. I didn't get it, and then I was about to start going home, and then I just saw the light catching the line there where the sand meets the water, and I thought, well, that's quite nice. And then the tide was coming in, wasn't great. I was about knee deep in seawater then, getting a bit wet and thinking I have to make a move here soon. It's getting muddy. I don't want to get stuck. But I got that shot. And the nice thing, again, it's the pier, which is, a well photographed subject, but not many people see it from this angle. So this is at low tide. So I've walked quite a way out on the beach. And then this is just as the tide's coming back in. So you don't really see the pier from this angle very often, from down on the beach. And you don't see it with a kind of load of rocks in front of it either. So that was an interesting composition to make. And I just with luck that the clouds were moving overhead at some speed in that direction, which gives you, I guess that kind of gives you another diagonal composition to it. Just the fact that the clouds are moving from top left towards like middle right of the picture.
Yeah, that's true.
So everything's just kind of like pointing in towards the edge of the end of the pier, which I guess is really the subject of the photograph. And then while I was there, I turned around because the tide was coming in. I was getting stuck in the mud. I thought I better get home, I better get out of here. I turned around, and then I saw the view. So the other photograph from that set, that's called the Llandudno 3 Twilight in Town. It basically, I've just done a 180 with my camera and tripod from where I was, from the pier photograph.
Wow.
And again, you got those same clouds passing over.
Yeah.
Which kind of gives the sky a nice feel to it. And again, Llandudno Promenade is something that's photographed quite extensively, and people know what it looks like. Well, as I said, it was just about to get dark, and I thought I'd better go home. So the street lights had just started to come on. So some of the buildings have got those lights on the front, and I thought that looks quite interesting. And then, so maybe I should take a picture. So I stayed a bit longer and got a bit wetter, but I managed to, with the long exposure again, it just like simplifies the water,
Yeah.
So it's not really a prominent theme there. And just the rocks, they kind of make a sort of crescent shape.
Yeah.
Which just sort of leads your eye up in towards the top right-hand corner is the subject of the photograph there, really. On those buildings, with the lights on. Yeah. And just luckily the clouds are a bit brighter above the buildings there as well. So I thought it worked quite well, actually. So yeah, sometimes I was going to say you get lucky. It's not all about luck, because I still, if I hadn't gone out that night with my camera and walked around for a couple of hours, I would never have got that picture. So not just luck. It's, what a wise man said to me once: luck is where preparation meets opportunity. And I quite like that. Yeah. Because, if people say, oh, you were lucky to get that picture, like it wasn't a total accident. I was there with my equipment. I knew how to use it. I was prepared to be knee deep in water to get that photograph in an incoming tide, and
plus you actually turned around to take the other picture. That's actively engaging with your location to sort of say, I'll take this shot of this composition and these colors being captured, and then the other side is, the light in the clouds is actually creates the balance between the light of the sea or the shoreline. Otherwise it would have maybe been a bit overbalanced with the sky if it was totally dark, but because it's got that light patch on the right, it balances all the light on the left, doesn't it, really? Which wouldn't be a conscious thing, but subconsciously you will see that, and it will create an appeal Because surely you'll have
Yeah,
this.
I think you're right. I definitely wouldn't have seen that because the clouds are moving quite quick. So they don't really look exactly like that anyway,
Yeah.
when you're taking a photograph. But yeah, like you say, it's just a bit of a happy accident. And probably in the editing phase, I probably added, I can't remember exactly, but I think I would have added some darkness into the bottom left of the corner there, probably just to match the sky in terms of the tone,
Yeah.
Just so you kind of, I find that it, like, if you put something dark at the top and the bottom, it kind of keeps your eye in the frame.
Yeah, narrows the scope of your focus a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So your eye isn't going up here and all down there looking for the subject, and I always find it's a mark of a good composition is if you load up a picture, within not even a second, your eye has gone to the subject. It's found the subject, you know, without having to go, oh, is it over here or there? No, bang, it's there. Yeah. And your eye will travel around the photograph, hopefully, if you've got a successful composition, using whatever leading lines or curves or whatever. And then, so I think, that one worked out quite well.
Yeah.
I'm quite pleased with that set.
Because we've talked about how you do approach things. I mean, obviously some photographers will specifically do light and dark dramatically, the chiaroscuro or tenebrism or whatever kind of influence they have of using that light and dark to create drama. So that is just preferential. That's not necessarily a make sure you don't do that. Is there a set of do's and don'ts that you are aware of that you would kind of be able to share with people who are watching that want to start trying out photography but aren't aware of what does and doesn't work? Or I suppose you've got to find that, but I mean, is there anything where you can say, I wouldn't do that, or like, I've learned this is a do or a don't?
Yeah, in terms of technique, I mean, yeah, I think so. I think, with composition, like you said, I think people have just got to go on their own journey and make their own mistakes and stuff, and find what you like. But yeah, I think with landscapes, don't point your camera at the sun, that never works out good. And just like understand the limits of your camera, like it's going to struggle. If you point it at something very dark and something very bright in the same photograph, you're giving your camera a lot of work to do, even if it's an amazing camera, and you're probably giving yourself a lot of work to do in the editing software afterwards. So even how software is amazing these days, cameras are amazing, it's still better if you just get it right in the field as best you can, so try to capture as much information as you can in the field, use the best format, so I always shoot everything in raw file, 14-bit raw file, just capture as much data as you can, understand how to use the histogram on your camera so you can see the range of tones that you're capturing. And it should usually try to capture the brighter tones as best you can without going too bright. The reason for that is if your picture's too dark, there's actually less information in a file, right? If I took the same photograph twice and one of them was dark, let's say it was underexposed, it might come out 30 megabyte raw file. Yeah. If I exposed it so it was brighter, it might be 40 megabytes in the file. So you've got more information to start with. And then when you put that into the editing software and start cropping bits out and, adjusting it, you're gradually reducing the information that's in the file all the time. So just capture as much information as you can in the field. Make sure everything's in focus, check the focus all the time. Get a good tripod. Everyone makes the same mistake, right? Because in the beginning, somebody more experienced than you will tell you, make sure you get a good tripod. And you go, yeah, okay. And then you go, and how much is a good tripod? And you're like, whoa, I'm not paying that much for a good tripod. But you need a good tripod. If you're going to be out in like rough conditions, windy conditions, just having good equipment is just going to make your life easier. It's one less thing to worry about. So my tripod is strong enough and the ball head is strong enough. Like sometimes my camera can weigh 5 kilos, right? With lenses and everything on it. But I can pick the tripod up with the camera and still attached to it, and just like put it on my shoulder and walk about, and then put it back down again, and I don't have to worry about it moving or falling off the tripod or anything like that. It's solid. I put it down and in a good position. It's not going to wobble. It's not going to fall over. Don't buy too many lenses. Again, that's a bit of advice and no one will listen to. They'll hear it, but they'll do it anyway. I think probably it's just part of the journey, isn't it? I think probably if you'd be fine with like a bunch of prime lenses, right? Cheaper than expensive zooms. If you're going to use a tripod all the time anyway, you don't need vibration reduction lenses, stuff like this. You get a 24mm lens prime, a 50, and maybe an 85 or something a bit longer. And just get to know those lenses really well, and get a set of filters that will fit all 3 lenses, just with adapter rings, so you don't have to buy too many filters. Polarizer is useful if you're shooting near water a lot, like I do. I don't actually need to spend that much on a camera, I don't think, really. I mean, my first camera was secondhand. It was a used DSLR. I had no idea how to use it. So I got some advice from professional people. And you probably learn more in 1 hour with a pro, like one-to-one, than you would do in like a week reading books or being on the internet or watching YouTube. Yeah. It's just like way better. You will just learn so much, like just how to operate the camera, what this button's for. Do I need this? Do I need that? Do you need to understand everything? It's just much easier if you can just, relate one-to-one with a person on that.
Have you ever had your printed out a book or anything like that of your images?
No, and I'm very lazy, in fact, in terms of producing anything. To my shame, most of my images are still just on a hard drive on a computer. I do have printers, and I have printed some out, and there are a few on the wall. Not enough, because even when I got the printer, I thought if I get the hang of printing, but then I just end up with a folder full of printed images sitting on a desk, that's not really any better than having a hard drive full of images that no one ever gets to see. So I said to myself, okay, if I'm going to print something, I'm going to print it, mount it, frame it, and hang it. Right, it has to be the whole process. Which is what I've tried to do and failed, because usually, it's a whole process. It's quite time consuming. There's one good thing. One good thing about COVID lockdown was it did present an opportunity just to sit down and spend a few hours. But printing is a whole science in itself. Color science and calibrations and all stuff like that. It's a whole thing. So, but I think it's an important. I've mentioned the photographic journey a couple of times. I think that is an important part of it too. Learning how to print your own images, get them mounted, framed, hung up, look at them again. And usually,
like a coffee table book, you've got a specific aesthetic to your choices. A coffee table book of your selections would be unique to you, and it's obviously you've got like a wide breadth of different journeys that you've been on, not just a photographic journey but literal travels to locations. I don't know if you'd consider that would appeal to me, because I still
that's a good idea
of a physical product at the end of certain things.
Quite right. I think that's important. It's to become like let's say a complete photographer. I think that's something you have to do. Or an exhibition or something like that, I think.
You had any? Sorry.
I think you'd learn something along. I think probably the next phase would be something like a website or some online place where you can. That would force me to organize these photographs properly into folders and sets, and the other thing is I need to learn how to edit them. Not just as individual pictures, but as part of the set or part of the portfolio. So these images work together, not just because they're all taken in the same location, but because the tones match, exactly complement each other. So that's something I need to learn next, really, and then maybe website will come after that.
Yeah.
I'm still just trying. I do a bit of printing occasionally, but it's another science to learn all by itself. Printing.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The nice thing when you print something out, you think it's finished. I'm sure artists are the same when they do a painting as well. It's never finished, is it? You know,
Oh,
you put it on the wall and you think, oh, I'm quite proud of that.
yeah.
Next day you come in, you look at it and you go, oh, hang on, that's too dark. What? No, let's take that down. Back on the computer, a bit more editing, and then try again.
That's still considered abandoned as far as a lot of my paintings are just supposed to finish. I just abandoned it at some point. We're running a bit low on time, I'm afraid. So unless I'm going to send you another meeting, I was just going to ask what I rudely cut you off earlier with. I was going to say, have you had anything published anywhere? Have you had anything submitted to any competitions, any magazines or anything like that? Or papers?
So I had some pictures published in a magazine a few years ago. A lot of years ago, actually. And since then, I've not bothered with much, really. I don't like the idea of competitions. Yeah, I've kind of avoided them, really. I'm not sure if it's a case of I don't think I'm good enough, or if I'm a bit cynical, I just think it's just a way for them to get loads of free images from people. You know, there's a couple of times I've had. I took a picture of the lightning hitting the building in the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, and that went to like a couple of news outfits and stuff. You know, news companies.
Yeah,
and I was just at that time I was just pleased to get it, just for people to see it. But I wouldn't do it now because I don't think you should give your work away for free. You know, if you value it. And these days, they'll say, "Oh, can we have this picture? We'll give you credit." And it's like, well, credit's not going to pay the bills, is it? Do you know what I mean? So no, you can pay me for it, and then at that point they all disappear.
Yeah.
So I don't think you should give your work away for nothing. Generally I've kind of avoided trying to do that.
Fair enough. If people want to see your work, should they go to your Instagram? Is there anywhere else, or just your Instagram?
Just Instagram at the moment. Yeah, they can have a look around on there.
Very good.
Which needs updating as well.
Well, yeah, I'll leave a link in the description of this video so that people can check that out, which they absolutely should. Thank you very much for having this.
Thank you, mate.
It's been nice catching up with you as always.
Pleasure.
Cheers.
Thanks very much, man.
Thank you.